What's up, Nashville? Welcome to this week's episode of What's Going Down in Bruintown. We are sitting here with a very special guest, Stephen Mansfield, who is a New York Times bestselling author. Belmont kids, you probably remember he visited our school a couple weeks ago for a convocation, but now we get to hear a little bit more behind the scenes about who he actually is. So thank you so much, Stephen, for being on our show this week.
Great to be with you. Great to be with you.
Well, tell us a little bit about how you got started in writing.
Well, I was a pastor for 20 years, and so that sort of, connected me to speaking and a love of words and all that kind of thing. And then I got a couple of master's degrees and a doctorate along the way. And so I was, loved history, loved the past. And, as you write for your degree and do your papers and so on, you sort of realize you love to write. You maybe have a little gift for it. And in time, I began to realize I wanted to write books, and the opportunities came along. And I wrote my first book on Winston Churchill, and it did well, and that sort of started the whole thing.
Well, talk about, some of the books that you have written, and you obviously have a theme to what you write. So talk about that.
Well, the thing that I'm most interested in is faith, religion, and how it impacts leadership and cultures. So, but I do it in a different way. I don't write, sort of inside the church kind of books. I write books about faith for the general market. So I wrote a book on Winston Churchill. I wrote a book on Booker T. Washington. I wrote a book on George Whitefield. I wrote also the governor of Tennessee asked me to write the state's history of religion. So all of that was kind of in that theme. And then my first big book was The Faith of George W. Bush. And you remember, he was not that articulate, he was not very well spoken. And he kept on making sort of faith comments, but he wasn't clear about what he believed. So they knew who I was in the White House and had read some of my other books. And when I decided to do this book, I said, would you give me some access? They said, we'll give you some, was kind of their answer. So we began to get a story nobody else had. And so The Faith of George W. Bush was a really big seller. I think it's 1 million something, 6, 4, 5, something like that. And that started it off. And then I wrote The Faith of the American Soldier. I wrote about the faith of Barack Obama. And so all of these sort of faith-themed books, even a book on Guinness beer called The Search for God in Guinness, just about how faith impacts business. So my whole theme is about how faith impacts things in what we might call the real world. Not to be insulting, but it's not about church stuff. It's not about church history or your devotional life. It's about, how, for example, would Mitt Romney lead since he's a Mormon? Or how does George W. Bush do his thing because he's an evangelical? Or what is Barack Obama's faith and how does it affect what he does in office? That's the stuff I go after.
That's really great, and especially because they are iconic figures in America, and
exactly.
You can key in on that other people may not get a chance to.
Right.
Well, do you have any particular stories about any of these figures that you did write about?
Yeah, probably my favorite funny story that I trot out whenever I want to is I was in the White House and I was talking to the president, and I got asked to step out because of some phone call he needed to take or something. And a few minutes later, I was talking to some friends out in the hallway, way down the far end, and all of a sudden I began to get showered by M&Ms. And the drug of choice during the Bush White House, during the Bush administration, was M&Ms. They were in all kinds of vats all around the White House. And what had happened was the president had come back to the door to say, okay, we can start again. We can come back in. And I hadn't heard him because I was talking away. And so finally he just took M&Ms and just started throwing them at me. So we had a good joke afterwards. I said something like, I'm going to tell the people, out there that you're abusing me. He said, well, 82nd Airborne works for me, so he was sort of threatening me back. But that's kind of my fun story, to have a president throw M&Ms at you. The tougher stories occurred when I was writing The Faith of the American Soldier, and I got permission from the Pentagon to be embedded with the troops in Iraq. Well, you hear the stories, you watch TV, you see these guys over there, you don't really know what they're dealing with. But, I was at bases that took on fire. It's the first time I've ever been under fire directly, from mortars. I was in choppers and medical facilities. I watched people die. And I got to tell you, that's a whole different, that really brought it alive. So even though I was writing a book about war and people dying and their faith and what they believe as they watch their friends die, boy, it's a whole other thing when you're over there. And I don't want to make it dramatic. I was never close to death, but just to be in a bunker hearing the percussion up above, knowing that may be killing somebody right there, that was some of the tougher days of my life. Not out of fear for my life, but being aware of what these thousands and thousands of kids, your age, were dealing with. It really touched me.
Oh, I bet it did. And I'm sure those who have read the book probably equally feel, just as touched. Well, do you have anything that's coming up or that you're thinking about introducing to the audience, or are we allowed to hear about that?
Absolutely. I just finished a book, actually two books, one just in the last few days and another a few months ago. The first one was on the faith of Abraham Lincoln. It's called Lincoln's Battle with God. And I love that book. It's Lincoln, for reasons I won't go into, thought he was cursed early in his life because of some things in his family line. And he really sort of became the village atheist. But later in his life, I don't think he became, a traditional Christian, but I do think he became a man who at least believed in a sovereign God, and that we see that in the second inaugural address. So that book, that's what that's about. And the other book that I've just finished that I'm very excited about, that's actually going to come out before the one that I wrote before, is called The Mormonization of America. And it's all about how the Mormons went from being kind of a despised sect in American history, and now, we're in what Newsweek calls this Mormon moment, with a Mormon running for office, two of them actually, and, Glenn Beck and the Broadway play and the Stephanie Meyer, the woman who's written the Twilight series, and all that kind of thing. Mormons are just very, very prominent. So I'm not so much, involved or concerned with Mitt Romney and his Mormonism, his faith, but how did they make this progress from this rather unusual religion started in 1830, based on an angelic visit and translating gold plates, and some folks watching will know what I'm talking about, all the way to the point where we might have a Mormon in the White House. It's a tremendous journey over 180 years. So that's what that book's about. Both of those will be out later this year.
Well, I'm excited. I know our audience is going to be excited about that. Well, like I was talking to you about earlier, the purpose of the show is to be an inspiration to those who have a desired profession. And so you are our first author, and I am very excited about that. But what words of advice would you give to those who are wanting to get into writing? People have those ideas, they never put them on paper. So what would you tell them to do?
Yeah, a lot of people say journal and things like that. I tell you, in my life, the two or three most important things were, first of all, to read a lot, and to not just read for information, but to try to fall in love with words themselves. The stuff that inspires you. Then writing is almost all about your voice, and it's not the voice that you're speaking with; it's the voice in your head. When you sit down to write, if you hear kind of a narrative voice in your head, that's that writer's voice. And every great writer has said, I hear a voice in my head. And it's not like some spirit's dictating. It's that the voice that you hear when you read a book is speaking, so to speak, as you try to write. And I think the final thing that I would say about writing is, man, this generation, and I consider myself part of it, of course, but let's say from your age to my age, I'm in my 50s, I assume you're in your early 20s. So during that 30-year span, man, the opportunity to change the world or have an impact, through the written word. We used to talk about, scholars used to talk about the fact that the picture, the image, television, movies, all of that would kill the written word. But look now, Twitter and Facebook and, blogs and all of that. I mean, the written word's more important than ever. So I'd say a couple of things. Whatever you're majoring in, I would take some time to take some courses in English and writing and so on. Second of all, what's great is a student for free can have a blog and a website and Facebook and Twitter. Use that stuff and spread your influence and then develop the writing skills. I think the future for writers is brighter than ever.
I think you're right. And now tell our audience where they can find you, where we can buy your books, what your website is.
And my website's Mansfield Group, just my last name with GROUP attached.com, mansfieldgroup.com. My books are pretty much everywhere, Amazon, of course, but you can always get them through my website. All we do is link to Amazon, but come visit us anyway. So mansfieldgroup.com. And on Twitter, it's at Mansfield Writes, and Mansfield Writes on Facebook as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephen. You guys heard him. I hope you were inspired by his words. I know I was. And I hope you will now go out and check out his books, check out his website. And so thank you so much for being on our show this week, Stephen.
Great to be with you.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching this week's episode of What's Going Down in Bruintown. And until next time, I'm your host, Kayla Becker, and have a great week. Bye.